Hey everyone, my name's Adonis. Welcome to another episode of The Smoke Has Cleared. Today we're talking about Resident Evil Village. I've played through the game a bunch of times now, and I thought, wouldn't it be a great opportunity to kind of give you guys my opinion on my various playthroughs, the story? So this is going to be a no holds barred discussion. I will be going into every story moment, all the gameplay elements, bosses, etc., etc. So please, if you haven't already, go play through the game, come back and watch the video, and let's have a great discussion about Resident Evil Village. So, the best way I can describe Resident Evil 8 Village or Resident Evil Village, I'll probably be going back and forth calling them both, but this is like a cocktail. It's a concoction of everything that kind of makes Resident Evil what it is, whether it be from the Resident Evil 4 days to the 2 to games like 6 and 7 and the end of 7 with the Chris DLC. It kind of is this mishmash of what people perceive to be, or what Capcom perceived to be, as the best parts of Resident Evil that are going to kind of broadly appeal to the most widest audience possible. Now, is that a bad thing? Depends on who you ask. I would say it's not. I'd say this game is approachable enough for me to be able to recommend to friends who are very casual, who just buy your Call of Duties and Maddens and 2Ks every year, but also enough for someone like me who spends way too much time, or in some cases not enough time, playing anything and everything that comes out, that I still come away satisfied, surprised, and excited for what the future of the series holds. Starting off with what I'll consider to be the least important part of the game is definitely the story. Ethan Winters is probably the most comical protagonist of all time. Not saying I didn't like him. I think people who came away not liking Ethan are maybe a little bit too harsh or take maybe the game and Seven's story too seriously. That being said, this dude is used, abused, and has some emotional gravity to him, but his responses to this are the situations he comes in are so funny that they kind of do inherently endear me to Ethan, especially by the end of the game and his fate and whatnot. But outside of that, it's a carnival experience in a way. You're going to each of these kind of four lords, right, in their haunted houses and experiencing the rides they have to offer. There's not much deeper than that, in my opinion. There is backstory you can read on them, obviously. I collected, I want to say, every item in the game except for one in terms of documents to read and whatnot. So I was able to essentially take away all that you possibly can, and nothing was too impressive, but nothing was also that offensive. And I didn't have any emotional ties to big 8 foot tall lady to be mad about her kind of short lived presence in the game. But I also, by the end of it and in my subsequent playthroughs, understood that this game is supposed to be, again, a cocktail of experiences. It is a mishmash. It is a horror AMF, as some could call it. And while that metaphor may be weird, it is something that I think is fairly accurate.
So, touching on two aspects I quickly mentioned about this horror game cocktail. One, the village intro, great section, not much to say about it that hasn't already been said. And two, Castle Dimitrescu and Lady Dimitrescu and her daughters, also the same thing with the village. This part has been picked apart to death. I can't add any more nuances. I will just say it's still great. I think it's going to go down as one of the more iconic places and entries in the Resident Evil series. And while it was short lived, I again understand that now due to the rest of what the game had to offer.
Another positive, House Beneviento, Benevia, blah blah blah. Don't care. Don't. I'm not gonna work on pronouncing it. What a shining moment, in my opinion. Did not expect to see anything like this in Resident Evil 8. I was thoroughly surprised at what the area had to offer, and my God, I recommend this game to everyone who doesn't play games a lot, just so they can actually experience the baby. I remember streaming it, and you could probably go back and look at the super long hours and hours of footage that I have on there. But my initial reaction to seeing the umbilical cord and then piecing together like what that was to then what the monster was, and I was like, it's the baby, like, and not even in a joking way. I was literally just like, oh my God, that's a goddamn baby. That is hilarious. This is a genius area, and was thoroughly impressed with just the atmosphere and the experience of running away the first time. As for Heisenberg's Factory, I enjoyed it, and I'll leave that with an asterisk I will address later, but I thought the setting itself was fairly interesting. He was this kind of Frankenstein creating monsters because he's so fucking bored and smart kind of guy, right? I wish there was more interaction with Heisenberg. I think as a character, and especially his performance, was just very well done. I love the kind of bravado, cheesy, hamming it up kind of dialogue he had with Ethan, and I wish there was a little bit more of that. I thought he was a very strong character that was semi underutilized, and especially how he turned out to be utilized in a way. But overall, area was interesting. I thought the combat encounters were fun. I liked the jetpack portion. I enjoyed going to do the molds and kind of exploring different parts of the factory, etc., etc. So, I would say if we're going to look at it from a cocktail perspective, then Heisenberg's Factory was like just the club soda portion, right? It's necessary, still a good time, adds a little bit of, flavor and a little bit of texture to whatever you're drinking, but doesn't really add anything or push it over the top overall. Now, as for the weakest section, or weakest portion of Resident Evil 8's areas and experiences, or let's say the worst part of the horror game Resident Evil cocktail, which has to be the liquor, is Moreau, is the fishing village. It's just a massive boss arena that, for the character of Moreau, who is the runt of the litter and has something to prove and has these kind of failed experiments of, oh, they all turned into blah blah blah. Like, there was no interesting enemies in the area. There was no interesting encounters. It was very much so, again, a problem I will kind of explain later, just a one note boss fight. And considering the kind of funny rapport they have at the between Ethan taking one of the vials of Rose and between him and Moreau, and they're kind of cheeky back and forth. It's something I thought had more potential, and then upon subsequent playthroughs, I just found more and more to be so much left on the cutting room floor, which I can totally understand from a development perspective. Can't have scope creep, can't go crazy with content, but at the same time, I felt that in some instances could have been cut back in some areas, added more here, and really done the character of Moreau a little more justice. Because come on, man, the guy already has a pretty hard time as it is, being like a half fish, half runt of the litter kind of guy. And above all else, besides the metaphors to cocktails and the Resident Evil Carnival, the big bad of the game, Mother Miranda, was such a disappointment in my eyes. Of course, not from a lore perspective, and if you didn't know, then yes, the metamycite and the mold and all this, or Mother Miranda, they're the start of it all. And Oswald Spencer used to work with her and was inspired to do the virus, and oh yeah, great. Okay, well, fuck you, you crazy bitch! None of that translates in actual gameplay, in actual boss fights, what you experience, and even the ending where it's kind of this rushed, okay, we're gonna scooch you along to Mother Miranda now. So I think as the big bad of the game, as the origin of a lot of the events in the Resident Evil universe at large, it's a weak experience. It's not the most memorable boss, and I think, while that isn't the crux of the game or the point of Resident Evil in general, in my opinion, are the bosses. I think to have a game with such interesting characters and setups, it kind of falters in that sense, and is going to be a recurring theme with what we will now get into is my problem with this game's boss fights. Now, yes, boss fights aren't the end all be all of Resident Evil series, but they play a pretty important role historically in the game. Nemesis, Salazar, the Baker family. You have these kind of great encounters that really define the experience, and this game does contain those in moments. Like I said, I love the baby portion. I thought that was a phenomenally great time and definitely subverted my expectations as to what I was going to see in this game. But every other interesting character, Lady Dimitrescu, Moreau, Heisenberg, they all just turn into big blob monsters. I don't care what kind of blob monster. You got fish blob monsters, dragon blob monsters, stupid tank with claw and middle parts blob monsters. It's all the same. They all got weak points. They're not that interesting. And while they're cool to look at and, character, concept art, little galleries and stuff to play, and especially upon my 4 playthroughs, are just so uninteresting. And you have all these great characters that you're building up and you're kind of showing around through your area just to have them become this gaping mass of flesh that just is trying to eat you. It's just very one note, very boring, and I feel like could have been executed a lot better. Now, I'm no game developer, I am no director of any sort, but I feel as if we are at a point in gaming, and especially in the Resident Evil franchise, where we are should be able to evolve past this kind of design. And going back to Heisenberg and kind of what I mentioned with my asterisk on the factory portion in general earlier, that boss fight's bad. It's kind of what inspired me to start making these videos in the first place. Is not that the boss fight was bad, but that people were having so much trouble with it that I then created the guide, and then now these videos and et cetera, et cetera. So here we are. But on higher difficulties, Village of Shadows, that boss fight is not great. It introduces a one-time mechanic that is not explained very well, that doesn't control well, and it's funny because, oh, you're in a tank and tank controls, yes, but at the same time, man, you're really going to throw that on people last minute like that and have an interesting character like Heisenberg sum up to nothing but this blob mass with two claw arms that, again, unless you're looking in the character kind of concept art gallery, you can't even really discern the guy's face at all. So I just think through setting up all these interesting characters and interactions, to have them devolve into that is so frustrating and boring, and just, I believe Capcom can do better. And I hope to God in the next 4 years, when the new or next Resident Evil installment will come out, we'll see less blob monsters and more interesting interactions like the baby, or even just some rapport like we had with Moreau, Lady Dimitrescu, etc. I think the characters in this game were so strong that it just still leaves a bad taste in my mouth to see them all evolve into massive blobs of nothing. So that's my biggest complaint. Going into the minor ones, we'll kind of just rattle them off. So first, puzzles, pretty boring. Didn't require any kind of brain power whatsoever. Do you shoot this fire to then light this lamp? Yes. Do you shoot some bells? Yes. Do you turn this ball machine around to make it get through so you can get some money? Yes. All fairly uninteresting, weren't offensive, again, in any kind of serious way, but, it just didn't really require a whole lot out of me. And I felt like at some points I was, ooh, I found this item, and I know where to put it, and then in reality, it's just kind of carrying you along with the main game, and it's not, it wasn't interesting enough, I would say, to hold my attention or be able to really ignore how glaringly bad, and just maybe not bad, but simple the puzzles were on my various playthroughs. And with the various playthroughs that I keep mentioning, this game is unique, and I think is moving into more of a positive light, changes so much upon your different playthroughs, right? So my first playthrough took me around 9.5 hours. I was going in every corner. I was crouching around Castle Dimitrescu, avoiding the daughters, and I was freaked out in the baby section. That was a whole ordeal for me, and I really took my time soaking everything in. Did all the optional side areas in terms of the treasures, the optional boss fights. Was very, very pleased in the sense of I got to experience the whole of what Resident Evil Village had to offer. And then once the game ends is when almost a new kind of game begins. You have the Mercenaries mode, which I've S-ranked through the regular areas so far, except for one of them I got an A rank, I will not lie. And then I've also now played through it on VOS difficulty, hence my Heisenberg walkthrough that some of you have may seen, and then also a speed run, which I will link the guide or the actual speed run that I watched to accomplish that. And here I'll actually show you guys kind of the little glitch shortcut that I used. So huge shout out to that for my time being able to speed run this game in under 3 hours. But the game changes so much. You can kind of see here I have using my stake with unlimited ammo, you're able to kind of use these cheat codes and interesting kind of guns and whatnot, and unlocks to have a new experience in the game. It's almost like the game is asking you to play it again from a different perspective. Okay, now you know what to expect on Ethan's journey, so how will you attack it this time? And for me, I didn't cheese my way to any of the actual in-game money. I just played through it once using the Dragoon with limited ammo, and then got the stake and would use that for a couple bosses here and there. And then besides that, had an absolute ball playing through it on VOS difficulty. Besides that, the speed run was still very enjoyable. The game is very unique in the sense that as the difficulty progresses, new enemies are added. It doesn't turn anything around like the Madhouse difficulty does on Resident Evil 7, but it still provides a new enough experience on your second playthrough that I think this game at minimum should be played 3 times. And there's even a challenge for doing that, and I think it's very well in all of you guys' best interest to do that. And I really enjoyed my time playing through Resident Evil 8 so many times. So overall, with my experience in the game, its various playthroughs, and kind of the perspective I have now with being able to be a little bit more objective with the good and the bad, the good is at the core of this game is phenomenal. Your first playthrough will be so memorable, the environments are great, the boss encounters, depending on your initial difficulty, even on hardcore, I don't think it's as horrible. Will be a good time. This game in Resident Evil is truly at the top of what I consider to be, survival horror now in a way, or survival action horror. Let's use that term, which is totally overkill in my opinion. But it's a phenomenal playthrough. I think everyone, if you have the ability to buy this game, please do it. I spend my money on these games. I'm not sponsored by anyone. I just, have a passion for this. And I think that Resident Evil, and especially with my love for the series, going back to Resident Evil 4 is my first rated M game I ever played, or was allowed to play. It does a phenomenal job. Now, are there problems with it? Yes. Do I think they will be common problems that everyone will experience? No. Not everyone is going to experience VOS difficulty, or want to. Some people love fighting giant blob monsters with weak points because it's easy and it's simple. Good for you. If that's your cup of tea, no hate. I just now want to see where this game will go in the future. Are we going to have more sections like the end game with Chris, shooting up a whole village with fire and SEAL Team 6-esque, squad behind your back? Maybe. Or are we going to have more of the House Bienvenido, horror baby aspects around it? Possibly. Only time will tell. But with that being said, I think this is a phenomenal game. Not my game of the year. I can probably say that now. We're halfway through, and with some great launches previously in the earlier part of the year, I would say that this is sitting within the top 3 for sure. But overall, Resident Evil Village is an experience that everyone should play, and I think that while it does kind of become this widely consumable horror game cocktail, this, anybody's allowed to enter theme park of horror in the Resident Evil way, it does that for better and for worse. And whether you fall on either side, I think is completely up to how you like to play these games, and especially what you expect out of them. But I will give credit where credit is due. Capcom hit it out of the park for my personal taste. And so, with that being said, with the horror game Resident Evil AMF drink, with our tickets punched from the Resident Evil Carnival, as I've so put, we've reached the end. This is the smoke has cleared on Resident Evil 8 Village. My name's Adonis, and I had a great time with this game. But if you guys have any other thoughts, or my conversation points have sparked any other ideas or opinions, feel free to leave them down below. I will try and link as much as I've talked to as possible in the description. And please go ahead and give a like, subscribe, whichever. I'm pretty new to all of this content making, so whatever you feel like doing, please feel free to do that. Again, thank you all so much for watching. Leave as much nicer, constructive feedback as possible. And excited to bring you guys more stuff. Let me know what you want to see. This will probably be my last Resident Evil 8 video for now until potential future DLC comes out. But with that being said, we'll say goodbye to this series for now. And until next time, when the next game launches, I'll see you then.